Hello and welcome to this special discussion for Adani Watch. We're going to discuss the travails of Gautam Adani, who in 2014 was the 609th richest person on planet Earth. And then he became the second richest man on Earth in 2022. And then on the 24th of January, a short-selling firm based in New York called Hindenburg Research brought out a report running into 32,000 words, resulting in the prices of the shares of widely held companies in the Adani Group collapsing. And as we talk, the valuation of his shares, of the company, of the shares of the conglomerate that he heads, the Adani Group, have collapsed by half or more. To discuss why this happened, what are the implications for the group and the future of the group and its impact on the political economy of India, I am very happy to welcome two knowledgeable experts on the subject who are here with me. Let me welcome Professor Arun Kumar. He's an expert on illegal transactions, what we in India call black money, retired as a professor of economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU. And with us is Ashok Kumar Bhattacharya, senior journalist who is the editorial director of Business Standard and has more than 4 decades of experience as a journalist. Okay, thank you, Arun. Thank you, AKB. If I can ask you to look at the big picture. Everybody was taken by surprise when this Hindenburg research report came out, just at a time when the Adani Group had announced the opening of the biggest ever follow-on public offer of shares worth 20,000 crore Indian rupees. And then he withdrew that offer. Why did what happened happen? And it happened in such a surprising manner.
So, Parunjoy, thanks for having me here. What we need to understand is that how did Mr. Adani become such a rich person? Unlike, say, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and so on, who developed some technology because of which their share prices went up, in this case, what was happening was acquisition of assets from various parts of the country, allocation of projects, borrowing of large sums of money from various banks and financial institutions, money coming from abroad. All that helped to raise the share prices way high. As the Hindenburg report suggested, that they were overvalued by about 85%, right? So therefore, that enabled Mr. Adani to become very rich very quickly. Now, this is where I think the Hindenburg, as short sellers, they saw an opportunity. And they then used that opportunity to beat down the stock. Now, my understanding is that when they beat down the stock, it was initially the main Adani firm, Adani Enterprises. And I think at that point, they could have intervened to prevent the fall further, but they did not. And once the Adani Enterprises shares fell, the other related companies' prices also fell, which then required them to actually support their stocks by a much larger amount. Now, the FPO, as you mentioned, that FPO, why did it get subscribed fully on the last day? That tells the story of what's been happening.
Let's stop here. We are going to come to that story in a short while from now. But let me bring in AKB into our conversation. I want you to add to what Professor Arun Kumar has said. But before that, I have 2 or 3 propositions for you, and I'd like your comment. We have several large business conglomerates in India. The Birla Group, the Tata Group, the Ambanis or the Reliance Group. We've all seen them become very, very big. And all of them were very close to whoever has been in power, in political power. But never have any of these groups risen in such a spectacular manner. They've risen over a period of time. But when you look at the corporate conglomerate headed by Mr. Gautam Adani, not only was the rise spectacular, nobody knew about him 25 years ago. He was just one more diamond trader in Mumbai. His family had a business in plastics. So not only was the rise so spectacular, the fall in the prices of his shares or the shares of the companies of the conglomerate he heads was arguably even more spectacular. So how do you put it in the contemporary history of India's political economy?
This is unusual. Let me put it this way. Such a thing has not happened in the past 75 or 76 years of India's independent history. I don't think any group has risen so fast and has its stock prices have fallen so dramatically and precipitously in such a short period of time. There's no doubt about it. That's number one. Number two, Paranjoy, you talked about a surprise element to the whole thing. The real surprise, to my mind, is how this element of overvaluation escaped the notice of India's regulators, and something that should have been known and was known to many commentators, including you, that there is overvaluation, there is, the group's close association with the powers that be has helped it acquire assets and make investments. Even at times, policies have been geared to suit a set of conglomerates, set of companies. Now, this has been part and parcel of the story of India's last 40 years post-reforms or 30 years post-reforms, that yes, reforms have happened, but regulatory bodies haven't functioned as well as they should have. And in the case of this group, Adani's, I think the failure of the regulatory bodies is stark. And I think the surprise is that why is it that our regulatory bodies failed so spectacularly? And today you have a situation where the country's apex court,
Supreme Court of India,
is set up an independent committee to look into it, and hopefully we will not see their report in a sealed cover, but it will come and available to the people. Because remember, regulatory is what? Regulatory is a watchdog for the people of the country, the consumers, the shareholders. Now, a regulator failing in its job, to my mind, is the biggest surprise, and actually a bigger surprise than Adani's rise and fall. And that, from a political economy perspective, is deeply worrying.
I'll ask you to elaborate on some of the points that you've raised, but let me ask Arun the point that you made, where you concluded your remarks. What we saw was that this has been alleged by the spokesperson of the opposition party, the Indian National Congress, that a union minister who he has not named called up several high net worth individuals. And they've been named Mr. Mukesh Ambani, Mr. Sajjan Jindal, Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal, the Hindujas, among others. And they apparently bailed out the share issue. And this happened on the evening before the union budget was placed on the 1st of February. And this was the last day of the share issue. But then after the presentation of the budget, that night, late at night, after 10:30 p.m., Mr. Adani, he withdrew the shares. He said there's too much volatility in the share market, and he says, I'm morally obliged to withdraw the money. So all of this is very, very unusual for a public share issue, supposedly the biggest of its kind in the country. Your comments and observations.
So my take on this is that the share of the Adani Enterprises was ruling at 2,900, whereas the offer was at 3,200. Okay, so why would any serious investor invest when they could have bought the share in the market at 300 rupees less? per share, right, is only for two reasons. One is there's a political pressure, which is what brings us to the question of cronyism, that there was political pressure. The other is round tripping. The money that came from abroad, that was round tripped. Now, any serious investor outside would also buy in the stock market rather than buy at the 3,200 rupees. Okay, so therefore, it shows the two mechanisms that have been used by the Adani Group to raise their share prices, to operate and acquire assets, as AKB was telling us. Now, cronyism in India is quite old. You can think of another major group, the number one group in the country. They in 1983 also had short selling against them. And overnight, 22 crores of rupees came in. And this was a question in the parliament.
I'm just interrupting
And
you. For the benefit of the viewers, can you kindly simplify and explain what is this short selling?
Yeah.
I mean, in the stock markets, how does it work? And Hindenburg Research has called themselves activist short sellers,
yes.
and they've done it to several companies.
Right.
Yes, please.
So short selling implies that if you think that a stock is overpriced, then you borrow money and you sell that stock, okay? Because when you sell the stock, the price comes down, and you expect the price to come down. At that point, if anybody asks, you can buy in the market and give it to them. But nobody will ask, because anyway the price is going down at that point of time, and therefore you become a successful short seller because you've sold at a certain price and the price has come down. So therefore you have made the difference between the two is your profit, right? So this short selling was done in the case of the richest company in the country in 1983. And overnight they brought in 22 crores of rupees and the price went back up. Now in
You're
the
talking
present
about
case,
Reliance
yes,
Industries
yeah, the
Limited.
largest company in the country. That's what happened in 83. And so they also reputed to have grown on the basis of cronyism. There were changes made in the regulatory apparatus at the right time for them to grow, etc., etc. They all got those reports in the 1980s. But this is at an astounding level. As AKB rightly said, this kind of cronyism has not been seen, where everything, whether it be regulatory agencies, as he's saying, whether it be acquisition of assets through pressure of the agencies, and a variety of other things, that have been allotted to them, whether it be when, the companies that they've acquired abroad, the projects that they've acquired abroad, everything, the state machinery has been helping in. So this cronyism is at an astounding level. And that's why when the FPO actually started, was fulfilled, but they needed money to support this stock. And I think that's why they withdrew the FPO at the last minute. And because soon after that, they repaid $1.1 billion as loan that they had taken from others. So they needed money to support the stock to prevent it from going down further. But by then, the rot had spread to all the companies. So what could have been sorted out with 20,000 crores on January 25th required now a few lakh crores of money to prevent the further fall, which they could not raise. And the money that was being round-tripped, the black money that was being round-tripped, whether their own money or their associates, whether they were politicians or bureaucrats or whoever was giving them money through this round-tripping mechanism, they could not raise that kind of money so quickly. And that's why it continued to fall. It fell till the 27th of February. And then after the 27th of February, then it rose till about the 8th of March. Okay. Then it fell again a little bit when the SVB Bank, etc. came again. So it's been falling and rising. It's been like a bit of a sort of a sideways movement in the Adani stocks.
And as we talk in the first week of April, we are seeing that if you compare to what happened in before the 24th of January, the average price of all the shares in the group have come down by half or more than half.
So they managed to raise some money. This company in the US, GQG, right? They have given 15,000 crores of rupees to them. So they've been having road shows trying to raise money. And I think their associates are trying to raise money through the black. And that's why the share market price went up. But then this SVB Bank and other things came up. The stock markets went down. That probably prevented them from raising their stock prices further because the markets were going down. So in a sense, there's a struggle between trying to raise money and the short sellers. Who's going to actually be able to prevail in the market?
Mm-hmm. Would you like to add?
No, what I would like to add to Arun's point is that short selling is not to be frowned upon. A short seller is not something that is illegal, at least in India. a short selling is a very good instrument for discovery of the market price. If a price of a scrip is overvalued, and I think a short selling is, as of now, a legitimate instrument for discovering what is a probably more realistic price. So, what Hindenburg Research did, by admitting clearly that they are an activist short seller, they tried to help discover the true price of the Adani shares, which unfortunately, in spite of the P shares, P value of
That's a
Adani's price earning
earning
ratio,
ratio.
and even the share prices being astronomically high compared to any other group and compared by any metrics, and Indian stock market regulator, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, just did not move quickly enough to do something, and that brings out another story, which is why did SEBI did not act in good time.
Okay.
to prevent
Let me.
such a thing.
Paranjay, just
Yes,
to
please.
short selling was not done in India. Short selling was done abroad.
Yeah.
In the bonds and the
Yeah.
derivatives that were there. Why? Because in India, I think would have been pressure. Whoever did the short selling, they would not have been.
Correct.
And the floating stock in India is very small.
Yes, as has been pointed out, that in all these companies which are
Right.
part of the Adani Group, the promoters or the family members and their close associates hold the lion's share. I mean, they hold the bulk of the
75%
Yeah.
is by the promoters, whether foreign or Indian, right? Then there are the institutional investors from abroad, but a part of the institutional investment from abroad is also the round trip money back.
I don't know. What I wanted to also say was that here is a group of companies were not fulfilling the listing requirements of the Indian stock exchanges. Now, here was the market regulator, which was turning a blind eye.
Yeah,
Right.
let me add to that. This was pointed out by several media organizations, CNBC Television 18, the Economic Times. Ravi Nair wrote a series for Adani Watch. And after that, we had a member of parliament,
Yeah.
Mahua Moitro. She wrote to SEBI saying, do something about it. And all this happened about a year and a half ago.
Yes. I mean, much before Hindenburg Research came. So that's why I said the surprise is that why did the Indian authorities did not wake up to it in good time?
Okay. I'm going to ask you a little bit to elaborate. One of the aspects of the Hindenburg report, and they've drawn on information which has already been in the public domain, is this whole, not just this issue of round tripping and what are called related party transactions. The allegations that have been made against these companies by agencies of the government of India, like the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, which is the intelligence wing of the Ministry of Finance and the Customs Department there, it says that a lot of allegations of over invoicing. Now we have the Adani Group, biggest importer of coal to India. It's also the biggest miner. It's the second largest producer of coal-based electricity. It's also the biggest producer of renewable energy. But these allegations have dogged them for several years now, that the allegations are that of over invoicing and the money being misutilized or round tripped through tax havens.
Right.
Would you like to elaborate on this?
So typically in India, you generate what are called black incomes or illegal incomes or incomes on which tax is avoided, is generated through under invoicing and over invoicing. And in export and import also, you do under invoicing and over invoicing to take a part of your profit out of the country. So when you over invoice your imports, what it means is that you're not declaring the correct amount at which it was purchased. And the difference between the two is your extra profit, which you then park in some tax haven. And there are 90 tax havens in the world, as we know. And then through the process of layering, you can transfer it from one entity to another entity, and shell companies are involved in this process. That you have one shell company in one tax haven, you move it to another shell company in another tax haven, then to a third, and the sixth layer is the final parking slot. So you can't track where the monies come from and so on. And then what you do is you can then round trip it through Mauritius or other tax havens like Cayman Island or Singapore or other places, and then what you do is you bring it into the stock market, into your own company, and that helps you to raise the stock prices in the company. So in other words, this under-invoicing, over-invoicing is a mechanism to move the money, the extra profit, into the companies of your own, and that comes into back.
Okay, AKB, one of the points that have been raised by whether it be other Indian business conglomerates like the Birlas or the Tatas or the Ambanis, they were all widely diversified. But you could argue that the Adani Group has been one of the most widely diversified conglomerates of its kind in this country, and they have interests in the world. Seaports, airports, we've talked about energy, coal mining, coal imports, generation of electricity, transmission of electricity, distribution of electricity. Then you have defense equipment, including drones, and you have the major player in real estate, including the Dharavi redevelopment program in Mumbai. And that's not all. You get into data storage. You have interests in ports in Israel, in Australia. You have interests in coal mines in Indonesia. And you have spread your wings across the country. You have very controversial projects in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. So one is the diversification of the Adani Group. And from there, that's not all. The oil that you consume, Fortune brand of edible oils, the apples that you eat. I mean, it all seems to be one group which seems to be having a kind of a dominant share of these markets and these products. And I'd like you to comment on one other thing, this diversification. And secondly, many of his projects, many of the Adani Group's projects have been dogged by complaints by environmental activists, whether across the country, in Australia as well. So these two aspects I'd like you to...
I think both are very valid points that you have raised. Yes, they are diversified, but there's one broad common theme barring a few consumer goods items that you mentioned at the end of your observations. Is infrastructure of different types. Even when they're getting into green energy, it is infrastructure. And as you know, infrastructure projects, particularly in India, the government plays a major role. So if you look at the group is trying to grow in areas where there is a lot of government involvement. And I think the group has thrived in an environment where the government role is significant. And the second point I would like to make in this regard, the diversification, is that they are not just diversifying in different arms of the infrastructure sector, but also they are in different states with different political affiliations. So, in a sense, that the group understands the importance of being close to the government because they're in the infrastructure sector, but they also know in a quasi-federal state, country like India, they need to be in different states ruled by different political groups. So they are a politically savvy group. So that is number two. Number three, your environment point is very important, and it is a matter of fact that any infrastructure project like theirs are dogged with controversies. I mean, why infrastructure these days? Even a pure, even a soft drink manufacturer is violating environment norms, and that is once again my favorite theme. Is a comment on poor regulatory supervision and oversight. And I think Adani is presenting that spectacle to us, thanks to these developments. One final point I would like to make is that the group's problems in the last few months have given rise to a situation where probably you will see the rise of other private enterprises to occupy some space which probably would not have been there if this thing hadn't happened. So in a largely largely, sad situation, I would say this is one probably a ray of hope that you saw the one state government, Uttar Pradesh government, cancelled an order that was to be given to the Adani Group. A smart meter project is a huge project, 7.5 million meters to be distributed. Now, clearly, the second, number two, and number three, which happen to be Larsen and Toubro and GMR, they have a chance to come and occupy that space. So this situation actually is probably making the Indian market a little more competitive than it was 6 months ago.
And especially when a former deputy governor of the Reserve Bank of
He's
India
talking
has
about
talking about
splitting.
how far 5 major conglomerates have contributed to inflation.
For inflation management, he's talking about splitting the
Absolutely. All
companies.
right. Okay. So I'm going to come back to both of you with your final comments. The question I have, we've talked about crony capitalism in the Indian context, where the government tweaks rules, changes regulations, there's regulatory capture, all to help private business conglomerates. Many argue that we've moved to a stage of oligarchy, where there's little or no difference between the business person or the business conglomerate and the state or the government. And in this context, when you look at a group like the Adani Group, which has a very, very major presence in infrastructure and entirely fueled by debt, where do you see now the group happening? We are seeing several projects have been put on hold. Coal to plastics project in Mundra. The French conglomerate Total Energies has said it's put on hold its investments in hydrogen. Several cement projects may not materialize. Several power projects may not materialize. There have been a lot of controversies about the Bangladesh Godda project, about Sri Lanka, and we are seeing a churn of the kind which we actually haven't seen in a long, long time. So where do you see all of this leading up to in the foreseeable future, maybe in the run-up to the next general elections in India, which is going to take place in 2024?
I think the ruling party has had this Chaiball model copied from South Korea, or the way Japan Incorporated was said to be ruling in Japan, where there was a close connection between the ruling party and the particular, capitalist business houses, which was supported. The difference is that Chaiballs, or in Japan, they developed technology, and that was used to actually progress further. Here, because of the
You're talking about the Samsungs and the Hyundais of the world.
Right. That's right. Here, none of these Chaiballs have developed technology. It's actually based on acquisition of assets cheap. It's based on pricing, which is where your point that the inflation has been created by these guys because they have oligopolistic power, and that's what their profits are based on. Now, as we go further, if this Chaiball model, which is failing, which has failed in the case of, say, Adani's because the situation has collapsed, as you point out, many of the projects that they were hoping to carry forward, those projects are not going to carry forward, and as AKB rightly pointed out, therefore others will have a chance. But the question is, the investment climate in the country has deteriorated because they don't have another model. And this inflation has reduced demand. We have just had the RBI report yesterday, which says that the consumption has not been rising as much. And if the consumption doesn't rise as much, private investment would not rise. So overall, the investment climate declining, the rate of growth would slow down further. And we have a large unorganized sector, which anyway has been declining. And this slowdown in the organized sector will mean that the rate of growth will further drop. So in going ahead, I see more and more trouble for the Indian economy unless the government changes its model of development from this Chaiball model to a much more widely spread, model. Second is this black money generation, black income generation, through which round tripping was taking place, through which funds were being brought out. Now that we'll have to see, because now these Chaiballs are not going to be able to get loans so easily to do their expansion. And therefore, how this round tripping goes on, that we'll have to see further what will happen to the Indian economy overall.
AKB, part of your closing comments, we saw the Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, on the floor of the assembly, where he has immunity, as you know, saying there's no difference between Mr. Adani and Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India. And I want you to elaborate a little bit on the likely political implications of what has happened. So far, yes, we had the finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, saying, no, no, Mr. Adani, as you pointed out, he's got interests in the Communist Party of India, Marxist ruled state in Kerala, the Congress ruled states in Rajasthan, in Chhattisgarh, and in the Trinamool Congress ruled state of West Bengal. And she's kind of attacked the critics of Mr. Gautam Adani and saying, the pot is calling the kettle black. But we haven't heard a single word from the Prime Minister. We have the Home Minister, arguably the second most powerful person in India, Mr. Amit Shah, saying that, the Supreme Court has appointed this committee, and SEBI can, is looking into the matter, and people can depose before it. But to the best of my knowledge, there has been no provision for public depositions by the Supreme Court appointed committee. So, where do you see this playing out?
Well,
in the coming months?
Briefly, what I would say is this, that yes, the Adani issue electorally can be a powerful issue, can be a potential game changer. And I think this is also the reason why the government is obviously concerned and shows those signs of taking preemptive steps. The very fact that a BJP ruled state like the Uttar Pradesh would cancel the order, the very fact that Rahul Gandhi's statements are being taken so seriously.
It's been censored by the Speaker of the lower house of Parliament.
I think the potential of this controversy cannot be underestimated at any point in time. But what I would still reiterate is this, that there is still as yet no smoking gun, and that is the turning point. The day you have a smoking gun,
what would you mean? What do you mean by that?
The reference is to when did Bofors became a powerful electoral issue? When there was a direct allegation and of the country's prime minister having received money. Now, I think we are nowhere near right now in the state.
So there are many people who will argue that, so what's new? There's always been a nexus between business and politics. The ordinary people
individual culpability, that's a big question in Indian politics. The individual leader must be seen as having done something. Now, that, as of now, it seems to me, is not yet been, no one being established. It's been talked about, so that will be the turning point, in my view, in electoral debate.
Yeah.
Paranjoy, I think what will stick is if it's linked to the problems that people face, like inflation. Like during the UPA 2, the corruption did not touch the Prime Minister at that time, but it was connected to the inflation, the corruption and inflation, the decision-making slowing down. That's why I said the impact will be on the organized sector and the unorganized sector. The economy is slow down. The problem inflation created by these Chaiballs, that is going to be there. So if these connections get established, so even though the direct link between, say, politician A and the businessman B is not established, I think if these linkages get established in the people's mind, and I remember at the time of Bofors, in the Kalahandi area of Odisha, I found people didn't know Bofors. They said, "Top ke mamle mein ghotala hai." There's something wrong with the gun. That's all they knew. So if that kind of connection goes into the people's mind, it might then.
We'll have to wait and watch. Thank you so much, Professor Arun Kumar, for giving us your views on the implications of the controversies surrounding the Adani conglomerate that have taken place in recent weeks. AKB, thank you very much for your observations, and we'll have to wait and watch what happens. And thank you very much for being with us on this program, where we discuss the implications and the likely future of the Adani conglomerate.